What are the keys to a great night out? Great food and drinks, great prizes, and great friends. Join us Thursday, January 22nd from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Key STL Burger, Bar, and Boogie in the Grand Center Arts District. Enjoy a live broadcast with Cam Jansen and Jim Hayes, plus special guest Matt Adams. Dig into the best smash burgers in town and get your shot at winning opening day Cardinals tickets, autographed merch, and more. That's Thursday, January 22nd, 6 to 8 p.m. at the Key STL, 3225 Olive. Come eat, hang out, and win.
Hey, great to have you with us on the Randy Karraker Show, presented by DraftKings, where the crown is yours. You see Matthew Rocchio right there. I'm Randy Karraker, and it is great to have you with us, and a lot to cover here. We're going to be here for about a half hour or so. And Matthew, first of all, always good to see you. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Randy. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. And the big story of the day, and it's going to be a big story nationally, St. Louis U, unfortunately, is ensnared now in the long national story. I'm not going to call it a long national nightmare, because this is going to go on for quite some time. It already has with professional sports, college sports, but St. Louis U now ensnared as a couple of years ago, the FBI alleges Bradley Azuero was involved in a fixing scheme in a game at Duquesne in which bettors placed $242,000 in bets for SLU to go under in their game against Duquesne, and Azuero, by this account, allegedly accepted a bribe to underperform in the first half, along with another, so far unnamed, St. Louis U player. And so St. Louis U is part of this mix. By the way, 15 schools, 20 players alleged today to have participated in the scheme. You have covered St. Louis University basketball for a long time. I have. I never thought of something like this before, but I can guarantee you now, anytime somebody has a bad first half, I'm going to. And oh, by the way, I don't know if the bets paid off, but the underperforming and Mizzou going under in the first half did occur in that game at Duquesne a couple of years ago. First of all, just to see St. Louis U associated with this, how did you feel about that? What was your reaction?
It surprised me. It jumped out to me, but obviously, you never know who's going to be involved. You can't really, pinpoint who it's going to be. And so there's always a chance it's going to be somebody on your team. I believe there's around college basketball, there's one coach who is currently still employed by the same team from a couple of years ago. And he now has been caught up in this and obviously has been suspended and will have to step away from the sideline because of all this. So, I mean, guys like Azuero were here for a short period of time and went to a different school and then are out of college basketball. So that hits a little bit differently than the fact that there are potentially some players who were involved in this who are still playing, or coaches who were involved in this who are still coaching. And that's certainly problematic, obviously. We talk about sports our entire lives, and if it's all just fugazi, I'm going to feel pretty hollow about what I've been doing for my entire adult life.
Yeah. Here's one thing about this, though. And I know that there might be people out there thinking, there is no integrity. I cannot bet on sports because I don't know what I'm watching or what the true result is. The level of scrutiny for these teams and these players is remarkable. For the FBI to be looking at all of these A-10 schools like St. Louis U and like Duquesne and the other schools that have been mentioned, not all of the schools, but many of the schools that have been mentioned on this list. For me, the fact that the FBI is looking that closely at Abilene Christian, at Alabama State, at Buffalo, Coppin State, Eastern Michigan, Fordham, Kennesaw State, LaSalle, Nichols State, Northwestern State, North Carolina A&T, Bob Morris, Tulane. The fact that those are schools that are being observed by the powers that be in the gambling industry and the integrity firms, that makes me feel better that my competition is authentic and real. And obviously we're presented by DraftKings, where the crown is yours. I feel better about betting on DraftKings now than I would have ever felt about gambling before we had this sort of technical scrutiny that is able to be applied.
I don't know. There's also a part of me that just that does think, and Matt Norlander pointed this out on Twitter, that does think the fact that all of these are mid-major, that a lot of this is from mid-major and smaller teams where players don't have as NIL money. And I think that's an interesting point, is that, are we entering a situation where the more going to be people from, smaller market teams and mid majors, because, they're the ones who are still in that same college risk of not having a lot of cash at hand. And that's certainly a potentially dark, turn in college basketball, if all of a sudden that's something that's more dangerous for certain teams than other teams because of the potential NIL money available. That's kind of, as a city where our biggest team is a mid-major, that's a little worrisome.
And it is interesting to note that in the indictment of all of the schools named, none of them are from a Power Four conference. So to your point, the NIL money is there at the Power Fours, and none of the 15 are Power Four schools.
They don't need to risk it. They have, at the little, especially that first year, there were guys probably only breaking off like 50 to, 30 or 50 grand that first year or so. But I mean, that's when you're a college kid, that's all you need. That's a big deal. And so it's a risk. And obviously, you got to get the word out there to these kids about how dangerous this is. And you have to put guardrails up so that sketchy people, like the people indicted in this, the non-players who are part of this indictment, which I believe is now up to 26 people involved, I believe 27 different D1 teams, but you said none of them are Power 4 teams. It's insane. It's dangerous. And there is a world where these kids can be targets for criminals. And that's, they got to figure out ways to keep these kids safe and keep them away from these situations. And, NIL at the same time also has to find, maybe a fair, point at somewhere so that this isn't as much of a risk for smaller schools compared to big ones.
Yep. By the way, St. Louis U currently is really rolling. An impressive win over Fordham, with Richmond coming to town over the weekend, and the Billikens just moving up 16-1. They've won 10 in a row, and another great performance, the Wednesday night performance against Fordham. And I know that we're going to get, they were only playing Fordham, and they're only playing A10 teams. You can only play who's on your schedule. You can't blame these kids for who's on their schedule. And for me, the biggest thing is they aren't winning these games against the teams that they should beat by a bucket. Matthew, they're winning by 20, 25, 30 points. And what more can they do besides play hard all the time and prove their dominance against lesser teams? And I think that's what St. Louis University is doing.
And this might sound stupid to people, but the Billikens kind of ticked off a trio of victories in the last 24 hours. They beat Fordham by 22, big victory. Stanford, their only loss, took down UNC by 5 points, big thing on their schedule. And then this morning in the updated net, Santa Clara is now a quad 1 victory. So, I mean, they had 3 kind of wins in a 24-hour period, all that boosted up that schedule, make the schedule look better, makes the record look better. So, yeah, they're moving on up in that capacity. I did not have it in my rearview mirror that the Santa Clara game could turn into a quad 1 this early in the season, but it did. So credit to Santa Clara, credit to obviously Stanford, the team they lost to the next day by 1 point, for beating up UNC and making that loss look a little better. Yeah, Billikens are rolling right now. Last night was a really interesting game against a very different team. They came out and ran zone against the Billikens right out of the gate. Billikens have been a bad zone offense team. And so to see them finally figure it out and generate points at the level they were able to, they had 2 long scoring droughts, one in the first half, one in the second half, that added to about a total of 6 minutes. And both times they ended those scoring droughts by going on 8-0 runs that put the game back out of reach from Fordham. So it really was another impressive night for the Billikens. A lot of open seats, guys. Saturday, 3 p.m. There's no reason not to go watch the best show in town. They will try at least 3 alley-oops every single game they play. They're undefeated in Chaifetz Arena. They're building something special there. That's a ton of fun to watch. As somebody explained it to me last night that had went to the game, you watch them play on TV and they play fast. Watch them in person, and you will understand why teams cannot handle them. You will understand exactly just how fast this team plays and just how fast one of the fastest teams in basketball, how stark that is when you actually see it in person. Go to Chaifetz. They got great deals right now. The game is going to be awesome
Yep.
on Saturday afternoon. They got a 5-pack for the last 5 games starting on January 30th with Dayton. Again, over half of the home schedule is already gone. So you potentially have less chances than more to go see the most exciting basketball team in St. Louis in decades. Get out there and see it on Saturday afternoon.
And Matthew, you look now at the AP poll. Arizona's number 1. Iowa State is number 2. Michigan is number 4. Gonzaga is number 9. The 4 teams that have a greater point differential in their games this season than St. Louis U are Michigan, Gonzaga, Iowa State, and Arizona. 4 of the top 9 teams are the only teams in the country that have a higher point differential than Mizzou or St. Louis U's 21.7 per game. And that goes to show you that they're doing everything they can do against what is perceived to be a lesser schedule. So this team is on its way to the NCAAs. I'm with you. People need to get out and see them, and they'll be fun. The defense, meanwhile, for Mizzou stays
Crucial.
I'm not going to say good, but I'm going to stay firm. And that was a nice win over Auburn. And then Illinois just keeps rolling as they throttled Northwestern. So all 3 of our area teams are doing really well, and it wouldn't surprise me. And I know that Mizzou is way down the list in terms of rankings and in terms of perception, but I won't be at all surprised if all 3 of these teams wind up in the NCAA tournament.
When it comes to Mizzou, I defer as always to people like Brendan Schaefer and Gabe DeArmond. And Gabe last night, his big statement in the game on X on the Power Mizzou account was that this game put Mizzou back into a spot where their expectations for this season are being a tournament team. And that is certainly a jump. They've come out firing in conference play. That's been huge. If Gabe says that's the expectation, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, Illinois is at that point. And right now, it might seem a little pie in the sky for some people, but the expectation at this point, if you're watching all 3 of these teams, is that we're watching all 3 of these teams in late March.
And when we hear about the selection committee, we always hear about them looking at the net ranking. That's one of the more important, not that it's the only element that they use. They have a ton of analytics that we don't see publicly, but right now Mizzou is 64. It's a 68-team field, and Mizzou is 64, and they have the opportunity to move up. And obviously with the NCAA, you have all those automatic bids as well. So they've got a little bit of work to do in the net rating, but being 64 puts you within striking distance of the NCAA tournament, and that's all you can look for. Okay, let's talk some baseball because Nolan Arenado, and you were just telling me before we came on, had his introductory press conference with the Diamondbacks, and Nolan is being hailed there as a future Hall of Famer. They're very excited in the Valley of the Sun about getting Nolan Arenado on their team, and he goes to a place where they have Perdomo at short, and they have Marte at second, and they have Corbin Carroll in right, and they have Moreno behind the plate. They've got a group of people that have played not only in the postseason, but in the World Series. They bring Merrill Kelly back. They've got Brandon Pfaadt. They've got a really good starting pitcher in Corbin Burns. There's a lot of elements that Arizona has now that the Cardinals don't have. So it wasn't a surprise for Arenado to make the comments that he made to the media in Arizona about how his skill set and age don't really match what the Cardinals are looking for right now.
Yeah, there were some interesting comments I'm going to put up here in just a moment. I'm putting a little graphic together for these quotes because it just says a lot, because the we're not seeing a lot of it, Randy. I'm not trying to say this is hugely representative of what a lot of fans think, but the fan reaction I'm seeing that is still annoyed by this move. They're revolving just around that this wasn't needed, that they could have played him. They could have used his defense. They needed a veteran presence. It's good having Hall of Famers, things we've talked about being options here. Those are the reactions I've seen from the small negative group. And I just think that they're working off a false premise.
Right. I think that if you haven't paid attention over the last year and November, December, January, year and last 15 months, if you haven't been paying attention, it's not your job to pay attention to what the Cardinals are doing. It's our job, and then to relay it in bite-sized form to you. But the Cardinals said last October that they were essentially going to go with a youth movement, if not a rebuild. And this is where they were headed. And if you didn't hear that, or if you didn't believe them, that's understandable, because the Cardinals have always been, in my lifetime, a team that has gone for it. Even when they were not great in the 70s, they would go out and they'd trade for Reggie Smith, and he was a good player. They went and got Lynn McLaughlin, who was a good pitcher. They went and got Raleigh Eastwick and Will McEnany, a couple of relievers that had played for the Reds on the Big Red Machine. They went and got Bobby Bonds to replace Lou Brock. They did a lot of things in the 70s. Obviously, in the 80s, they bring in Darryl Porter. They make the big trade, but they were just great. They were just great, and they had a lot of youth. And then once the Brewery sold the team, then the DeWitt group has done an incredible job until the last few years of supplementing youth with really good, solid veteran players. Well, when that stopped working, this is the direction they were headed. And Matthew, there was no way on God's green earth that Nolan Arenado was going to help the Cardinals win in 2026. And if you, and I've mentioned this before, if you're not going to win, you're going to be a 500 team, or in this case, I would imagine a less than 500 team, then it's a waste of money to have Nolan Arenado being paid $42 million to block somebody on your roster. And that's exactly where the Cardinals stood with him, and that's what he understood. As you see the quote, seeing where the Cardinals were headed in the past few years, it was very evident that there's a step that they need to take, letting these young guys go and finding out who they are and who their identity is. I think I'm just kind of in the way of that, specifically Nolan Gorman, in a sense. I've kind of always felt that last year. And hey, he's exactly right. He should have felt that. He should have felt that when the Cardinals tried to trade him to Houston, for gosh sakes. He obviously picked up on that. But the Cardinals wanted, they said before last season, all during last season, after last season, we want to give our young players runway. And some guys that didn't get enough opportunity for runway last year, especially at the position they were supposed to play, Nolan Gorman, they're going to get that opportunity now because Nolan Arenado is not here. For me, it's an A-plus move for the Cardinals. What they said they were going to do, they have done, and they couldn't have done it any better. Nobody was going to give them a high-level prospect. Nobody was going to pay Arenado the lion's share of his salary. So he goes to a place where he's able to utilize his no trade and get to a place where he's comfortable. The Cardinals get him out of St. Louis and out of their lineup, and they have to pay something to the Diamondbacks to get him there. But overall, I just don't see the negatives in this trade. And again, Matthew, I understand, and I know you understand, that people think that, okay, you got to have a superstar, you got to have a Hall of Famer on your roster. And that's been where the Cardinals have been since, I think, 1909, but that's just not the case anymore. This is a different organization than it has ever been in your lifetime or my lifetime.
It's just it's got to change a little bit, and I know people aren't happy about it, but it's a fact of the matter. But I will now ask the question, and we're going to disagree on this one, but I'll ask it anyhow. Mm-hmm. Do they need to change even more? Because now that the interminable, dealings of Nolan Arenado are finally over, people are now saying, "Oh, wait a second, they could just move somebody else to third base to open up JJ Weatherholt's spot at second base. It doesn't have to just be Nolan Gorman. There's other players we could move to third base, or maybe even left field if Nootbaar is hurt. We don't have to trade everybody." Is all of a sudden what I'm hearing, and I'll just lay out the obvious, just what the argument is. We know that Brendan Donovan is coveted. Putting off the trade until the deadline or even next winter potentially risks his value because he might have a down year. He might get injured. It also sacrifices the inherent part of the value equation that adds in the fact that he currently has 2 years of control on a cheap contract. You lose that part of it. And so just those flat out reasons, I think the smartest thing for the Cardinals to do, and as Chaim Bloom said yesterday, prioritizing a offseason of gaining more young talent for the future, the smart move is still to trade Brendan Donovan this winter. And I think that's the best, the most conventional wisdom in the sport is still move him this winter.
I don't disagree with that, but here's the key. Another team has to prove that they covet him. All right. You don't trade him for example, what you got for Nolan Arenado. You still have to you have a valuable piece of property in Brendan Donovan, right? Because as you mentioned, 2 years of control at a very reasonable cost, all-star player, gold glove player, silver slugger finalist. He's got a lot going for him. And he's a guy at 28 that could still theoretically be in his prime at the age of 30, 31 when the Cardinals are ready to win again. And here's another thing. We don't know how good Nolan Gorman is going to be. It might wind up being that your best chance to have a quality third baseman in the organization is Brendan Donovan. So if I'm the Cardinals, I'm absolutely willing to trade him, but I'm not going to all the other teams in baseball under the general manager and Pobo group text and saying, hey, come and get Brendan Donovan. We need to get him off our team. That, like you did with Nolan Arenado, like you did with Sonny Gray, like you did with Wilson Contreras. That is not the approach you take with Brendan Donovan. The approach you take with Brendan Donovan is, hey, we'll listen, but if you really covet him, you've got to prove it to us, and we've got to get good return. Brendan Donovan is still really valuable to the Cardinals, right? They can play him. Gray wasn't anymore. Contreras wasn't anymore because of the money that they were going to be making and the players they were blocking at the major league level. Certainly Nolan Arenado was in that boat, but Brendan Donovan's not in that boat. If, as you mentioned, if Lars Nootbaar isn't available on opening day, wouldn't break my heart to have Brendan Donovan play in left field with Gorman at third and Weatherholt at second. If you decide a month into the season and that Gorman has a whiff rate of 37%, you say it ain't going to happen for him. And so far this season, Brendan Donovan's kind of bounced around to left and giving guys a day off at first, second, third. If you have to move Brendan Donovan to third base, doesn't bother me one bit. And by the way, I will add this. If you look at the current Cardinal roster, and this is from a Cardinal person, this isn't from me, but it makes all the sense in the world. The best leadoff hitter on the Cardinal roster right now is Brendan Donovan, and it's by a wide margin. The Cardinals don't have a second best leadoff hitter. I guess Nootbaar would probably be the guy, but at the moment, the best Cardinal leadoff hitter is Brendan Donovan, and they think that he'd be perfectly fine as their leadoff hitter. They don't mind having him leading off and playing wherever the field finds him on a particular day.
That's I mean, and the versatility is undeniable, and I think the big question that a lot of people will have is kind of your point. You think let's say they do sign the right-handed outfielder, and do you think that opening day Brendan Donovan starts over Nolan Gorman at third base if he's still on the roster, or do you think we need to find out what Gorman is still supersedes Brendan Donovan, staying in an infield position or something?
I think it depends on who's pitching for Tampa that day and who's healthy. Is Lars Nootbaar healthy? And is Ivan Herrera behind the plate? I think there's so many questions that have to be answered during the 6 weeks of spring training that it would be hard to say. For example, if Herrera is your catcher, then you could DH Gorman, right, and play Donovan at third if Donovan is still on the roster. Again, the health of Lars Nootbaar plays a role here. If you are going against a left-handed hitter, you might want to sit Gorman anyway. Remember, Gorman sat on opening day last year and Burleson played. So I think that there's a lot that goes into it. Now, presuming that things go as I would expect them to go, that Ivan Herrera would not be your opening day catcher and would be your opening day DH. And let's say that Lars Nootbaar is healthy and good to go in left field. Then it might come down to 2 players out of 3 play. It's going to be Donovan, it's going to be Gorman, it's going to be Nootbaar. I think Donovan clearly plays, and then who doesn't? Is it Gorman that sits or Nootbaar that sits? If Gorman sits, Donovan plays third. If Nootbaar sits, then Donovan plays left.
Yeah.
Make sense?
And yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. The one thing is just, are we confident they're going to pull back on last year's kind of move in July of we're not moving Brendan Donovan around the field anymore? Because that was something that
No.
kind of became a pretty stringent axiom for them last year, and maybe it was because of the injuries, and maybe this year their hand is just too forced.
Yeah, well, because your Weatherholt's going to be at second.
Yeah,
So you have almost no choice but to move him around. And one of the things, for example, if Victor Scott, the second, is hitting the way he hit in the second half last year, there might be days where a healthy Newtbar plays center field and you have Donovan in left if Donovan is here. There's so many things that they can do. And the other part of it is what happens, and this is really getting into the weeds because Baez is going to be a factor here. But if Walker determines that he's not the guy in the first half of 2026, then maybe you switch the outfield around, and maybe Newtbar is in right on certain days with Donovan in left if Donovan is still on your team. I think, and we'll find out probably in spring training or early in the season when they need to see something from Jordan Walker is. But Matthew, I really think that Walker gets April, May, June, might get to the All-Star break, and that might be the finite time for us to determine whether or not Jordan Walker is going to make it with the Cardinals or not.
And see, this is why I think we need to start seeing some of these catchers play first base, because you have to open up the possibility of, if there's a problem there, Alec Burleson takes some right field again. We get some of these catchers some at-bats at first base, and that way, if Jordan Walker doesn't prove it, then you need to constantly, to your point, be elevating the other parts of your system constantly. We talked about it yesterday. Every year, a big name player needs to come up, and right now, multiple 2 to 3 guys each year should be able to come up and make an impact. And so, if Jordan Walker's out, start the conveyor belt, and that means figuring out what is Bernal, what is Crooks. Get one of them playing first base, get Alec Burleson out in right field, and keep that conveyor belt, the talent rolling. That's one other aspect I really do think we need to see. It sounds so like stereotypical and video gamey, but there's so many reasons to see one of these catchers play some first base.
No doubt. And I think for me, Herrera would be the guy, because think about how much Herrera got hurt last year not playing catcher.
Yeah.
And I want to keep Ivan Herrera healthy, but I don't want him to be a DH. He doesn't want to be a DH, and he's too athletic, but he's tall enough and has good enough hands that he could be a pretty good first baseman. I advocated on this show last year, him playing left field. I think that would be a good move as well. But to your point, when you look at Dale Murphy, who was a 2-time MVP, started as a catcher, wound up being an MVP center fielder. Craig Biggio is in the Hall of Fame, started as a catcher, second base, outfield, back to second base. There are a ton of players over the years that have started out as catchers, and Joe Torre was a catcher, moved to third base and then first base, and was really good. Todd Zeile started out as a catcher, wound up being a first and third baseman. There are a lot of players in baseball history that started out as catchers and became effective because of their bats at other spots in the lineup. And if Herrera becomes that guy, I think all the better for the Cardinals. Matthew and I, by the way, are going to tell you, we're going to give you a couple of bets for DraftKings where the crown is yours. And I'll tell you what, it's so much fun to watch games and to be able to kind of experience what they're doing in Vegas, right? Because DraftKings has your back with early exit protection. You want to make a player prop. If the player in your eligible NFL prop bet goes down at any point in the first half, you still get paid in cash. And that was so valuable for so many people last week when George Kittle went down. And if another player goes down, you'll be able to take a look at that. Matthew, as you well know, my favorite team this week is the Chicago Bears. Why?
Yeah.
Because my favorite team every week is the team that's playing the Los Angeles Rams. And I'll tell you what, I'm looking at that game and I'm feeling, because of the way the Bears have played, the fact that it's going to be a high of like 15 degrees, and I don't dispute the quality of the Rams play. But when you have the Bears on the money line at plus 164, I got to take that. That's a Sunday night game, Sunday night at 5:30 St. Louis time. It's going to be like 7 degrees when that game starts. Rams players, pay all due respect to Devontae Adams, who played in the cold, and the running backs have both played in the cold. Kyron Williams from here, Blake Corum played at Michigan, all of that stuff. But when you are able to practice in the cold, it's one thing. But when you have to practice in the warm and go to the cold, it's a different thing altogether. And in games where the temperature before game time, I believe it's a 40-degree cutoff, Matthew Stafford is 1-9. So I'm going to take the Bears at that plus like 164 on Sunday night against the Rams.
I like that one a lot. I'm having trouble this week. Right now, all I have in my head, Randy, is that I simply am going to bet the winner of Texans Patriots to win the Super Bowl. That's the one thing I have in my mind on Sunday night when that game ends at around 6 p.m. I'm going to put a lot on the winner of Texans Patriots to win the Super Bowl. I legitimately think that, every year I think we see, a lot of years we get a divisional round that's kind of a proving ground, I think, for the actual Super Bowl. And I think that's the game this week. If I had to pick a game this week, Randy, I think I'm going to buy a couple points and take the Seahawks around -5 instead of the -7 that they're at right now. I think that's what I'm thinking.
All right. And what you need to do is download the DraftKings app. And if you do that, then all you need to do is use that promo code you see on the screen right there, STL Sports, and turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or call ccbg.org. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino in Kansas, wager tax pass-through may apply in Illinois, 21 plus in most states, void in Ontario. Restrictions apply. Bet must win to receive bonus bets which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, call dkng.co/audio. Limited time offer.
And
Randy,
Matthew, let me just give you that number here. Matthew Rocchio, Matthew Stafford, 1-9 in cold, rainy, or snowy conditions since moving to Southern California. His completion percentage drops to 55% when the temperature falls below 20 degrees.
Jesus. I like that. And I think some people are going to like this, Randy. Our last little piece of info today, I wanted people to see this. The Athletic coming out with a rundown of the first kind of moves in this year's international market, and it truly is a new era in Cardinals baseball. The Cardinals today helped Emmanuel Luna, an outfielder, celebrate his 17th birthday by signing him to a $2.3 million bonus, 6'2", one of the top power hitters in the class, and he has more room to grow. They also signed Dominican shortstop Carlos Carrion to a $1.1 million bonus, a switch hitter with above average athleticism. Both of those rundowns from the Athletics' Melissa Lockhart right now on The Athletic, running down some international signings being made. How about the Cardinals? We knew there were going to be a change. We knew this was going to be one of the primary changes. And right out of the gate, $3.4 million spent for Cardinals across two players.
And hopefully the evaluation process is better than it has been in the past. The Cardinals in the past have spent a lot of money in the international market, obviously getting people like Carlos Martinez and Randy Arozarena and Jahan Thomas, Adolis Garcia. They've had a lot of them. If I'm not mistaken, Matthew, the only guy since baseball instituted the limit on how much you could spend in the international market, the pool that you can spend, I believe the only Cardinal to come up to the majors and spend more than one full season with the club is Carlos Martinez. They have not done a good job of being able to identify guys once they're in their organization or to get their guys to the major league level. So hopefully under Chaim Bloom and this regime, these youngsters will make it to the majors and become stars, because the only way for a team like St. Louis to get stars, especially when you've never drafted high, is to get them in the international market. So hopefully this works out.
And by the way, the Cardinals are in the top group. They're split into 6 pools is how the bonus money is doled out. The smallest pool gets $5.4 million. The largest pool gets just over $8 million. The Cardinals, part of the largest pool alongside the Diamondbacks, Guardians, Orioles, Pirates, Rockies, and Royals. That pool, again, just over $8 million. Cardinals with 2 signings today.
Hope Emmanuel Luna is better than Hector Luna.
There we go. I like that.
There we go. Great job as always, sir. Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you.
That is the great Matthew Rocchio. I'm Randy Karraker. Wilson getting us on the air here at STL Sports Central. And we are presented by DraftKings, where the crown is yours. We'll see you next time here on the Randy Karraker Show.